Any is used in where statements, and it's used in similar way to in. But instead of simply checking for equality, it can also use other comparison operators like less than and greater than signs. But when we use an equality, so we do equal any, then it's identical to in. Any is also identical to some, and that's true for all the different inequality or comparison operators. But any and some are identical. There's the same thing being called. It's just simply for readability purpose, sometimes some will be preferable over any, but any is much more commonly used than some. So the general syntax is still our select statement, and then from the outer query, the column that we're going to be comparing to the results of a subquery, and then we have our comparison operator, so equal or less than or something like that, then the word any, and then the subquery. So let's take our old solution here to the problem where we used in for the solution, and then let's change that to any. But before, let's just recap what happened here. So in the inner query here, or in the subquery, returns a result list with 5 supplier IDs. And those supplier IDs are all the suppliers that are toy suppliers or novelty goods supplier. To identify from the supplier table which suppliers these are, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the suppliers, and let's go ahead and add a supplier ID. And first, before I run this, let's go ahead and write down these. And then go ahead and run this. So here's all the supplier IDs from the supplier table. So what I'm going to do is the very first row here from the supplier table, I'm going to take the supplier ID and I'm going to compare that to the result set from this subquery. And that result set, of course, was what I got down here. So I'm going to start with taking supplier ID 1 here. So it's going to be saying 1, is that in this list or result set? And it is, so this returns true. So then the where statement is satisfied. So then I'm going to say, is 2 in this list? And it is, so it returns true for that. Then I go down to 4, and it looks in this list and say, no, it's not part of that list, so it returns false. So this row 4 here is not returned, and it keeps going through this, right? Okay, so when I change this to any, it does the same thing if I put an equal sign in front of it. This is exactly the same operation. If we change this to, for example, a greater than sign instead, what I'm now going to say is 1 here greater than any of these? And it's not, because 1 is equal to 1, but it's not greater than 1. So this row will not be returned. Then it's going to go down and say, is 2 greater than any of these? And 2 is greater than 1, so this row will be returned. So n is just saying, whatever value this contains, is it greater than any of the values returned from this result? And I can change this to less than or something like that, but in this specific example, I wanted it to be equal. All is used similarly to any, but instead of having to only return true for one of the comparisons, it has to return true for all the comparisons. If I again have a value here and I compare that to a list of values here, this value has to be satisfying the comparison to all those values in here instead of just simply 1. If again I return this result set here, and then if I'm looking here and I change this to all, and then my first supplier ID I'm going to pull here is a 1 from the supplier table. And then I'm saying it should be equal to all supplier IDs in this list here. And 1 is not equal to all of them, so that's going to return true. Then say the next one I'm pulling is 2. 2 is also not equal to all. And as a matter of fact, none of the supplier IDs, because it's a single number, will be equal to all of these. So all generally makes more sense when I'm trying to do like something like greater than or less than. So if I'm doing greater than, then I'm simply saying is that 1 has to be greater than all of these. And that's not true. But say I get down to supplier ID, say 13, then that's going to evaluate to true because it is greater than all of those supplier IDs.